U.S. President Donald Trump has put a pause on Project Freedom in the Strait of Hormuz. Remember, Washington claims the move paves the way for a comprehensive peace deal. But Iran says that the U.S. has suffered a humiliating defeat. When Donald Trump announced Project Freedom, he said it is, quote, humanitarian effort and a favor to the world. A day later, the U.S. Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, said that the waterway is under American control and their Navy is guiding commercial vessels out of the Strait of Hormuz. But hours after Hegseth's statement, Donald Trump put his Project Freedom on hold at Pakistan's request. Reacting to this, Iran's Revolutionary Guard's Navy said that safe transit through the strait will be ensured with new procedures in place. However, the statement did not specify what these new procedures are. Donald Trump pulled back from Project Freedom within 24 hours. Let's quickly tell you how the events have unfolded in the last few days. On the 3rd of May, remember, Donald Trump announced that the American Navy will start guiding commercial vessels out of the Strait of Hormuz. In response, the IRGC announced the blockade at the entry and exit points of the Strait of Hormuz. Project Freedom came into effect on the 4th of May. United States claimed that some vessels have passed through the strait unharmed, and CENTCOM confirmed to have hit 6 Iranian boats that were trying to approach the vessels. On the very same day, UAE reported an attack on its Fujairah oil facility and intercepted multiple drones and missiles in its airspace. The UAE once again reported missile and drone interceptions in its airspace on the 4th of May. The U.S. Secretary of War and the Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff gave a briefing on Project Freedom, but hours later, Donald Trump announced a pause on the project. Now, the Trump administration has already informed the U.S. Congress that Operation Epic Fury is over. The U.S. naval blockade on Iranian ports remains in place. At the peace front, America awaits Iran's response to its 14-point memorandum that is aimed at ending the war and to start formal talks. Whether or not that happens, that is the big question that not just America and Iran are looking at, but the entire world is awaiting closely. So this by far has been the latest situation. Remember, Donald Trump in just a few hours has halted Project Freedom. Operation Epic Fury has ended as per Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State. And now we've got Iran responding, saying that the proposal that has been sent by the United States is essentially its own wish list and has nothing to do with what Iran wants in this entire deal. In fact, just a short while back, the U.S. president had also posted on his Truth Social that attacks will resume if Iran doesn't make a deal quickly. That, of course, remains a pressure tactic and a communication channel that Donald Trump continues to operate from. But whether or not Iran will give in is the big question. Also, of course, remember, this entire conflict has led to major disruptions in the global economy, and therefore the entire world now awaits what will happen next. There are hints that are coming in, at least from Washington, D.C., and American media reports that there could be some sort of memo that is being discussed between the two sides, but little is known. There are not many details that have come out officially from any of the sides. Let's quickly get a perspective of what really is happening. I'm joined by Colonel Daniel L. Davis. He's a military expert and host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. He's joining us live from Sterling, United States. Colonel David, good evening. Welcome to WION. Straight up question, the first one. Has the Iran war ended?
Definitely not. No, we are no closer than we were the day before, no matter what a social media post by the President of the United States may say, because none of the fundamental issues have been resolved. And that is that Iran is in firm control of the Strait of Hormuz. And they just yesterday published new permanent conditions for passage through. I think it's called the Persian Gulf Strait Authority. And they said, listen, we're in control of this. If you pay a fee, if you get an authorization, if you pay us reparations, you can come through. And this is permanent. So until that gets addressed, either the United States acknowledges it or the Iranian side refutes it, one way or the other. That is the central issue right now, of this entire war right now. And you see that the Iranian side is not only firm, but getting more firm in their control of it. So until I hear anything out of the White House that acknowledges that issue there, I don't know what else is on these 14 points, but that's got to be point number one, and it is definitely not resolved.
The White House did say that Operation Epic Fury has ended and that Project Freedom has been halted for the moment. What do you think of that? Because Iran has been upping the ante. They've been quite hardened in their stance, as you mentioned, as opposed to the American side, the Trump administration, which has almost softened its tone in the past few hours.
I definitely did at 7:30 this morning on Eastern Coast time. President Trump put this thing out that said, "Hey, as long as Iran agrees to what it agreed to, we'll end. This war could come to a quick end, and or otherwise the bombing will go back." He always throws that part in there, but he did make it sound optimistic, and yet he claims in there as long as Iran does what it agreed to, but there hasn't been any. He was on the New York Post on a telephone interview shortly after that. And he told the reporter there that no, don't pack your bag and go to Pakistan for a meeting yet. It's too early for that, he says. There are no face-to-face meetings even scheduled. And of course, you're never going to just send a memo back and forth between countries and actually do negotiations. You're going to have to be sitting at a table here. And there's nothing even planned. So I don't see anything that even holds the possibility of a near-term resolution.
So help me understand this, Colonel David. Who do you think is more keen, perhaps more desperate to end this war? This is a one-page memo that the Axios report is talking about. A one-page memo from such a long war. Obviously, it will have its own points and proposals, but from long negotiations, day-long negotiations of peace, to trickling down to a one-page memo, what does it say about both sides trying to end this war?
Well, look, there's no question that the United States is definitely in the desperate position here between the two, because the economic impact is having already significant impacts on our ability to do commerce, obviously with gasoline prices, diesel prices, helium, aluminum, all kinds of other things, petrochemicals coming out, fertilizer being the biggest one here. That is already having impacts. It's going to be felt at harvest time later this year in the United States, in Asia, and several other parts of the world. And it's going to be a problem that's already baked in. Every day that the strait stays closed and that flow doesn't return deepens the price we'll be paying later this year. And of course, then you have the issue of the price of oil and everything else that goes along with that, which is also going to remain high. And we have to get that off. Whereas Iran is suffering from the blockade, and they are suffering from the results of the first 40 days of active conflict. That's something that's much more refined, and that they can survive at home because they have the ability with all their natural resources to endure a long time, and they've got history for that. So they're suffering, but that's suffering that they can do indefinitely for many, many months. We can't go many more weeks without having profound, potentially depression-level economic consequences later this year.
Okay, quickly, last question, Colonel David, to you then. This entire, these fast developments in the last few hours are happening ahead of Donald Trump's visit to China, where he's going to be meeting with his counterpart Xi Jinping. Do you think a deal would happen at that time, before that, or after his China visit?
I would imagine that it's in America's interest to get something done before that, but I mean that's not even 2 weeks away if it sticks on the current schedule. Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister from Iran, just left Beijing and apparently had a really good visit, according to what he said. So you can see that they were kind of setting the stage there, and I'm sure China definitely wants the strait open, so they want this war over with quick. So they will be using some diplomatic efforts with both countries to get this thing over with quickly, but I think that they also would be fine with it if it kind of knocked America down a notch in the process. So they're not going to be putting pressure on Iran to be given into things. I think if anything, they're going to put pressure on the United States. We'll see how that works out.
All right, let's see how that moves forward. I'll leave it there. Colonel Daniel Davis, thanks very much for joining us on WION.
Always my pleasure.